Right, now, for more on this, we are joined in by an independent analyst who looks after the affairs in Afghanistan very closely, Mushtaq, who's joining us. Now, Mushtaq, let me begin by asking you this. Terror groups are in fact striking at will in the heart of Kabul. There have been the usual condemnation that has taken place from leaders around the world, but doesn't the attack once again show as to how the US forces are not being able to control the situation at all, considering the fact that it is the US-led NATO forces who are aiding the Afghan military in trying to keep the capital of Afghanistan safe?
Well, yes, this attack and the attack that happened last week, both have targeted very secure areas. So, of course, this is a challenge for the forces. But you know what? The suicide attacks sometimes are difficult to be tracked in a city which is established or built for 1.5 million people, and where over 6 million people are living, and there is a lot of commotion and movement of transport and individuals all around the city at all times. It's pretty difficult sometimes to really being able to defend against the suicide attacks, and this was one of those. So you can't really blame the national forces or the others, but of course there have to be some measures put in place where they have to really make sure that security checks and checkpoints are able to really spot these sort of endeavors and efforts.
You know, now the United States, of course, is coming out and saying that the Haqqani network needs to be dealt with very strictly. But there was a time when the United States was, of course, trying to ally themselves to try and find a peace process in Afghanistan with the Haqqani network, something which India had from the very beginning had been saying was clearly not the solution. So is there an indication, Mushtaq, that you see that the United States strategy could in fact change in the light of the recent events that have taken place over the last fortnight?
Well, US have mainly been focused on pursuing a kind of, as they call it in military language, hot pursuit on the battlefield. President Trump has been saying since last year, since at least 21st of August, when he announced his strategy for South Asia, they have been focusing more on using military might against the Taliban, and they will continue doing that. But in the meantime, the international community, particularly the US, will be putting pressure on Pakistan to dismantle the sanctuaries of the militant groups. On the other hand, the Afghan government is pursuing the agenda for peace. And in that regard, they have been calling upon Taliban to come forth for the peace negotiations. So this multifaceted effort will continue to pursue the situation in order to defuse the situation, where the international forces and the government of Afghanistan will continue fighting the Taliban. Secondly, they will try to mobilize regional resources in order to pressurize Pakistan to dismantle the safe havens and sanctuaries of the militants. And on the third side, the third activity will be that the government of Afghanistan will continue to push its agenda for peace negotiation with those who are willing to renounce violence and engage in political dialogue.